Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and armies of the Warhammer 40k universe, the grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace. There is only time for war. And today, we shall be delving into the details of one of the oldest organizations and armies of the Imperium of mankind. A force that is terrifying to behold and, some might say, the very scourge of the unclean powers, as they have no animus to coax, coerce, or seduce. Of course, I can only be speaking of the metallic armies of the Legio Cybernetica. Now I will note that I have performed this simpler entry as I did not quite manage to conclude the self-written piece I was working on. Green is an element. That and the fun of the annual BaldCon, which went out this morning, has left me without a surfeit of time to perform a more involved entry. But also, I have to admit that I have much less love of the things in Warhammer. Like many, I am more excited by the people, the heroes, the villains, the motivations, the people who inhabit the dark future. Hence my knowledge of some of the more cold and object or scientific-based details of this vast setting I leave to far more adroit lore masters who really enjoy these elements, and by thunder do they do them well. I think you know who I mean. I run a starter channel though, hence these issues must be covered, so here is my entry. But do know that I will be concentrating far more energy and creativity on the Mechanicus entry I am planning for the not-too-distant future. Sorry it's been so delayed. Tricky stuff. And so, for the very basics, let us lean on existing wisdom. To quote, the Legio Cybernetica. The Legio Cybernetica is one of the oldest sub-branches of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and is responsible for deploying fully autonomous Battle Automata for both combat duties and support tasks, intended to aid Imperial armed forces in the field. The Legio Cybernetica can trace its lineage to the time before the birth of the Imperium of Man, when Mars was an independent empire ruled by the tech priests of the cult Mechanicus. Its members regard themselves as an elite within the ranks of the Mechanicus, as their Legio has a long history of serving the will of the Emperor of mankind. However, many of those within the Legio broke faith with the Emperor during the Schism of Mars, siding with the traitorous forces of the War Master Horus, and fighting alongside his traitor legions throughout the Horus heresy. When this conflict ended, the traitor cohorts of the Legio Cybernetica fled into the Eye of Terror, where they remain to this day, warped and twisted by their exposure to the power of chaos. The remaining loyalist elements of the Legio Cybernetica pledged themselves anew to the Imperium, and its members took binding oaths of loyalty more terrible than any taken, even by the Astartes. The Legio Cybernetica traces its origins to when early tech savants experimented with artificial life during the age of technology. Ever curious, those earlier pioneers not only constructed vast hosts of automatons, but also gave their creations the gift of independent thought. That decision was to cost them dearly, and the rest of humanity with them. After the terrible consequences of those times, the dread concept of the Silica Animus was outlawed forever, its creators subjected to excommunicato fatalis, and its resurrection punishable by torture to the point of death. And yet, there were those who still yearned to walk in their shadow, to perfect a thinking machine. In lieu of creating automata with the souls of men, many recidivist tech priests created machines imbued with the animus of loyal beasts, or worse, with essences from the Empyrean. This too had disastrous effects. The resultant schism was exploited by Horus himself when he betrayed the Emperor. Its legacy survived with the Dark Mechanicum, whose members still go to infernal lengths to give life to their machines. Many later pattern robots are tainted by their association with the machine predators of that desperate age. So it is that in the 41st millennium, the animalistic Sanitar, Castanax, and Vorax patterns of Battle Automata are forgotten on all but the most intrepid and independent of Forge Worlds, and the dark mechanicum, spoken of only in whispered code. Yet the fear and dark legend of those unstoppable robot armies lives on. Yet, over the millennia since the heresy, the Legio Cybernetica has regained the respect and admiration of the rest of the Adeptus Mechanicus, as well as the other myriad Adepta of the Imperium, though in fact it has rarely been deployed in recent centuries. Legio history. One of the most feared and powerful of the legions militant of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Legio Cybernetica carries the onerous burden and dread responsibility of the use of battle automata in warfare, as well as the development, propagation, and maintenance of those terrifying machines under sacred charge of the Crimson Accord of Mars. Those sacred accords were one of the cornerstones of doctrinal law created at the foundation of the ancient Mechanicum during the Age of Strife, and forever forbade the creation of the abominable and soulless artificial general intelligence, AI, known as the Silica Animus, and pronounced a death sentence on any who remained or any Magos or mortal who would seek to create them anew. These accords, however, allowed the survival and creation of the lesser and righteous works of synthetic life still deemed sacred, the Bestia Mechanica and their kindred, and of those robotic engines designed for warfare and slaughter. The Battle Automata were given into the hands of the newly founded Legio Cybernetica to control. The Great Crusade. The service of the Legio Cybernetica on the field of battle was part and parcel of the Mechanicum's Treaty of Union with the Emperor, known as the Treaty of Mars, called the Treaty of Olympus Mons by the Mechanicum, and a great many cohorts transferred from duties as defenders of the Forge Worlds and retainers of the great Mechanicum factions and sects to act as mendicant regiments in the Great Crusade, fighting on every battlefield imaginable and serving many masters. Although their battle automata were difficult to construct and maintain, the arcane lore of the Legio Cybernetica's Magos, and the successes they enjoyed on the battlefield, ensured that several thousand active cohorts of the Legio Cybernetica were in existence at the outbreak of the Horus Heresy. The Legio was instrumental in ending the isolation that had consumed the human-settled galaxy during the long years of the Age of Strife. This massive expansion of the Imperium continued unabated until the Emperor's realm encompassed nearly the entire galaxy by the start of the 2nd century of the 31st millennium. Unfortunately, a new and unexpected threat emerged to challenge mankind's dominance over the galaxy. A galaxy-wide interstellar revolt was instigated and led by the War Master Horus, the greatest and most beloved of the Emperor's Primarchs, his superhuman genetically engineered sons. But even before the opening stages of his planned insurrection began, he knew he would have to secure the support of the Adeptus Mechanicus and their superior technology and weapons if he was to defeat the Emperor and conquer the galaxy. The Schism of Mars. In order to win over the loyalty of the Adeptus Mechanicus, Horus promised he would provide them with the lost secrets of ancient standard template constructs, STC technology, that had been recovered from the worlds of the recently subjugated Orician technocracy by his own Sons of Horus Legion. Convincing the Fabricator General, Kelbor Hall, of his resolve, the War Master secured the traitorous Archmagos' support by promising to provide increased autonomy for the Mechanicus after his victory, repealing all of the rules against the development of certain technologies that had been placed upon the Mechanicus by the Emperor. As a gesture of gratitude for his support, Horus supplied the Fabricator General with the information needed to open the sealed vaults of Moravec, a repository of forbidden technology and innumerable artifacts corrupted by the malign influence of chaos. The Emperor had ordered this repository sealed 2 centuries earlier, after the signing of the Treaty of Mars that incorporated the Mechanicus into the newborn Imperium. Their dark bargain struck. The Fabricator General pledged his continued support for Horus and promised that the Mechanicus would assist the traitors with all the technology and war material at their disposal, Eventually, civil war erupted across the Red Planet, as the tense relations between the various Mechanicum Magi who governed Mars erupted overnight into open civil conflict between those who remained loyal to the Imperium and those who supported Kelbor Hall and the traitors. When the Fabricator General and his Dark Mechanicum forces moved against the Loyalist factions, the robot cohorts, under the command of Legio Cybernetica, willingly obeyed their traitorous masters. In the subsequent fighting, many more of the Mechanicum soon joined Horus and his traitors, not bothering to hide the fact that parts of the Legio had been the first to declare for the War Master. The independent nature of the Legio Cybernetica's cohorts ensured that, as a whole, they sided in particular neither with Loyalist or traitor, but were split between masters they had long fought for in many cases. Other cohorts, mindful of their oaths of loyalty to the Emperor and fear of descent into anarchy, saw the traitors as base renegades to be destroyed, while others harboured ambitions to be free of the strictures of the Crimson Accords, and saw Horus's war as a chance to pursue the development of long-forbidden technologies. Following the defeat of Horus at the hands of the mortally wounded Emperor at the end of the Battle of Terror, and the banishment of the traitor legions to the Eye of Terror, those within the Legio Cybernetica who had sided with the traitors fled in disgrace as well. There they have remained for the last 10 millennia, gradually becoming ever more warped and distorted by the power of chaos. Legio Organization. Wary of the power these supreme killing machines could wield if joined together, power enough to overthrow empires as they had done in the dark times of the Age of Strife, it was decreed from the beginning that the Legio Cybernetica would be broken down into a myriad of self-contained and relatively small independent units known as cohorts. This effectively limited the power wielded by any single Archmagos of the Legio, the destructive power of the cohort resting in an array of between 30 to 100 Battle Automata maniples, each comprising between 1 and 5 of the Sacred War engines. Each cohort was governed by a senior priest of the machine cult, with whom the secret lore of the Cybernetica resided, and below them a covenant of Magus Dominus, who would govern the war machines themselves in the thick of battle. Myrmidons sworn to the cohort's service, and their own engine seers, servitors and thralls, who would see to the cohort's needs both on and off the battlefield. The cohorts also commanded their own support networks, mobile workshops, transports, battlefield vehicles, orbital landers, and even star vessels in some cases, but were otherwise forbidden to found their own forges or chantries, making them dependent on webs of fealty, supply and patronage from the great machine lord of the Mechanicum and its forge worlds for their long-term survival and prosperity. The Legio Cybernetica specializes in only one of the myriad areas of technical arcana, primarily the care and construction of all robots throughout the Imperium. Once employed by the forces of the Imperial Army and the Space Marine Legions as combat and labor support, they are now exclusively deployed by the Legio. In their heyday, the Legio Cybernetica was organized into several thousand cohorts, although only a small percentage of these were ever active at any given time. Each of these robot cohorts were in turn organized into maniples of 3, 4, or 5 robots, led by a Legio Tech Adept. Numbering rarely more than 100, the number of maniples within a cohort could greatly vary. However, a cohort was usually spread across an entire Astartes force as several chapters, or a single large Imperial Army force. The use of more than 4 or 5 maniples in a battle were rare, but not unknown. During the Horus Heresy, particularly large numbers of Legio robots were committed by both the Loyalists and traitors in an effort to minimize human casualties until a decisive final battle could be fought. In addition, the Legio was further divided into a number of sects. Each maniple was a self-contained unit, with a single tech adept typically overseeing the management of 4 robots on the battlefield. They were responsible for little more than providing the robots with the final Wetware programming, and for monitoring their progress during combat. However, They were also charged with the equally vital task of monitoring the overall progress of their maniple, and to ensure that a damaged robot was destroyed as quickly as possible, to avoid any possible danger a malfunctioning automata could present to their own side in the battle. This was done by remotely activating the robot's self-destruct system. There were also a number of other, lesser tech adepts, who performed all maintenance and repair functions for the maniple in between combat operations. Their presence on the battlefield was rare, but did occur in certain situations. Possessing the ability to repair virtually any item of Imperial equipment, it was said these tech adepts of the Legio were worth their weight in spares. Members of the Legio Cybernetica tend to eschew the gross cybernetic augmentations of their colleagues within the Mechanicus in favor of subtle bionic enhancements that do not disfigure or dilute their outwardly human aspect. But those who know a member of the Legio know that whatever humanity they do show is rare and fleeting. Those of senior rank or equally high status are known to wear the circuit-laced robes of a tech lord to identify their esteemed status. These senior Legio members are usually accompanied by a small maniple of robots for their own personal protection. Legio Cybernetic Personnel. Magus Dominus. The Magus Dominus, also called a Tech Priest Dominus, is a master of the arts of the Legio Cybernetica, a sect of the priesthood of Mars, granted the dread right to create and control the Cortex automata built for war and based upon the terrible secrets of the dark age of technology. Such strange and threatening powers are not without price, and by doctrinal tradition, such individuals surrender an easy route to power within the Mechanicum. So dangerous did their fellows consider the secrets they wield. Instead, Magi Dominus and their acolytes formed but one of the many factions and sects within the Mechanicum. Divided both by technological specialization as well as rivalry and ancient feud, each vying for power, knowledge and resource beneath the outward unity the organization displays, shrouded as it is by impenetrable mystery and arcana. Those found within the ranks of the Automata serve a vital role but are seldom the most powerful of their kind, who can instead be found in the command of the Legio Cybernetica. Instead, they serve the Magos Prime either under terms of personal fealty or in fulfillment of binding pacts of mutual support between their Legio Cybernetica cohort and the Archimandrite who stands as the power behind the Tagmata. Cybernetica Datasmiths. Datasmiths are the specialist rank of tech priests that program the Castellan robots of the Legio Cybernetica at the maniple level, often having to do so in the thick of battle. They have access to the dizzying array of weapons and arcana of their Forge World's arsenals, which they use in defense of themselves and their charges. Since the aftermath of the War Master Horus's rebellion, the Legio Cybernetica's robots have been controlled completely by their masters, not by the bioplastic cerebra and nerve-like tendril webs of Mechanicum constructs, but by sanctified doctrina wafers, fusions of biomatter and electronics, often in even shorter supply than the robots themselves. No bigger than the cards of the Emperor's Tarot, these slivers of wetware are entrusted to the Cybernetica Datasmiths that accompany the robot maniples to war. Inserted into the data slot, hidden behind each robot's chestplate, the wafer's command protocol will indicate every iota of the host's behavior, usually optimizing its ability to destroy its foes in a spectacular fashion. If the accompanying datasmith wishes to change the behavior of his robotic charges, for instance, to the assault-orientated Conqueror protocol, he must manually remove the first doctrina wafer and insert a new one in its place. Should a maniple of robots find itself in battle without a datasmith, it will continue to prosecute its last doctrina protocol until it runs out of power, something that usually takes solo weeks of unbridled slaughter to achieve. Such risks and limitations are willingly accepted by the cult Mechanicus, for the act of hardwiring independent thought into a battle automata is strictly forbidden. Imperial Robots. Over the centuries, The Legio has produced many robot designs. Many proved to be successful, and the Legio has kept the 5 most common Imperial battle robot designs in its inventory for most of the Imperium's long and bloody history. Some of these designs were utter failures, such as the disastrous Castigator class, which was so heavily armoured it moved slower than the troops it was designed to protect and support. Its survival capability was negligible, as it was only outfitted with meagre weapons, a single bolter. Patterns of robots. Baharat. The Baharat class robot was designed for battling many unarmoured foes at once. Standing at 4 meters tall, it is a mass of metal and muscle with 2 shoulder-mounted rotary autocannons. Its featureless face mask looking down upon its foes as it mows them down with an unrelenting barrage. The Castellan. The Castellan class robot was designed for general-purpose combat and assault, and is also ideally situated for a wide range of battlefield situations. It is armoured with a power glove on each arm, as well as a heavy bolter mounted above its chassis for additional protection and ranged firepower. This standard configuration makes it particularly effective in siege and anti-vehicle roles, and provides an effective complement to heavy weapon armament. The Castanax. The most common pattern of the widespread Castellan-type battle automata in service. The Castanax is a general battle unit developed during the Great Crusade from its ancient forebear. Primarily intended for siege work and shock assaults, the Castanax battle automata is a hulking humanoid machine with a notoriously aggressive and responsive machine spirit, and an enviable reputation on the battlefield. The Castanax, employed in units of 1 to 5 by the Legio Cybernetica, has a standard configuration of bolter and bolt cannon armament, and is able to maintain a punishing barrage of firepower as it advances. The Cataphract. The Cataphract class robot is a heavily armed general-purpose battle robot designed for use in almost all combat environments and situations. This versatility in a wide range of roles makes the war engine a highly deployable and popular machine among the Legio Cybernetica's cohorts. This robot can mount a variety of weapons for various purposes, the most common being 1 las cannon above its chassis, and a bolter mounted on one arm and 1 flamer mounted on the other. It is often regarded by some Imperial commanders as a jack-of-all-trades. The Colossus. The Colossus class robot was designed to function primarily as a siege weapon. Its standard configuration combines a siege hammer mounted on one of its arm appendages for attacking fortifications, with a bolter mounted on its other arm appendage for use against defending troops. The siege hammer can also be used in close combat situations. It also possesses a chassis-mounted multi-melter for additional firepower. The Colossus is often employed by the Imperial Guard as a cheap alternative to the use of heavy artillery. A few Colossus-class robots are maintained by the Ordo Reductor of the Adeptus Mechanicus, mainly for testing new and experimental siege weaponry. The Conqueror. The Conqueror-class robot was designed for use in battlefield situations where heavily armed resistance is expected. Its combination of potent firepower combined with heavy armor is a major benefit of its design. On one of its arms is mounted an autocannon, on the other a power fist. Above its chassis is mounted a heavy bolter for additional firepower. The Conqueror is ideally situated for assault, anti-vehicle, and anti-dreadnought roles on the battlefield. The Domitar. Accorded by most observers to be the last class of battle automata to enter production on multiple Forge worlds before the outbreak of the Civil War, the Domitar was a sophisticated variant of the ancient Conqueror pattern. Larger than the more common Castanax, alongside which it would serve, the Domitar was also swifter, designed to cross the open battlefield at speed, and built expressly to crash into the enemy with shattering force. To this end, the Domitar's shock protection and armoured frame was itself a weapon, while its blows were amplified to colossal proportions by the battle automata's inbuilt gravitational hammers. allowing it to pulverize battle tanks and, as it would later prove, even Legiones Astartes dreadnoughts in combat. As a line breaker, the Domitar was unparalleled in the Mechanicum's arsenal, and its tactical flexibility was further augmented by a missile launcher armed with a variety of munitions. The Crusader. The Crusader-class robot is designed for agility, as it can move quickly on the battlefield and strike a telling blow. It is a light combat robot, and is only lightly armoured. It is most often employed in an anti-personnel mode, and has proven to be very popular with the forces of the Inquisition and other groups like the Adeptus Arbites, due to its effectiveness in mutant hunter-killer operations. The Crusader is never used where heavy resistance or strong concentrations of enemy armor are expected. The Crusader is typically armed with dual power swords on each arm, and a chassis-mounted lance cannon. The Vorax. The Vorax-class Battle Automata is a hunter-killer unit created from the ancient and revered Crusader template pattern, said to date back to the Dark Age of technology, and which may be found on every major forge world in the Imperium. Created on pre-Imperial Mars to fulfill the roles both of search and destroy weapon, and exterminator of rogue machines and mutant vermin, their Cybernetica Cortex engrams are known to be particularly predatory and vicious examples of their kind. Such are the bestial instincts that sleep within their blast steel and ceramite bodies. The numerous cutouts and override cantos are hardwired into their control programming to prevent these tireless hunting machines from devolving into becoming like the renegades they prey upon in the shadows of the great forge fanes on Mars. Armed with a pair of rotor cannon and a lightning gun, the Vorax are prepared to meet most threats. At close quarters, their battle automata power blades make short work of even heavily armoured infantry units. The Skylax. No larger than an armoured man, the Skylax Guardian Automata demonstrates formidable power in a more compact frame. These sophisticated machine creatures are neither a true battle automata, lacking a cybernetic cortex, nor are they a true servitor class, as their organic component is almost negligible, reduced to ossuary skulls and human neural tissue harvested from the sources best left unknown. Their armoured carapaces, as durable as Adeptus Astartes battleplate, house instead powerful electrothermic reactors and banks of lucid cogitator stacks that process a storm of battlefield analysis engrams and protective tech incantations. A system so potent that some claim it borders on blasphemy of the Silica Animus. Prized far beyond the server automata from which they were developed using ancient secrets, the Skylax are found in the retinues of only the highest-ranking Magos, where they serve as bodyguards and elite shock troops. Though there are some factions within the Adeptus Mechanicus who would have no truck with the Skylax, claiming sinister provenance for its design, and that the automata gain a subtle and dangerous self-awareness over time. The Sanitar. Designed as a mobile artillery platform rather than a general battle unit, it is armed with a helix pattern plasma mortar. This is a terrifying weapon, able to launch dense spheres of blazing plasma on arcing trajectories over defensive barriers and into the heart of enemy fortifications, incinerating anything in their blast radius with a liquid tide of sun-hot fire. The Sanitar's frame, built to accommodate the huge weapon and the power systems and fuel reserves required to supply it, is considered larger than even the bulking Castanax-class battle automata. Its frame is also heavily reinforced, both to withstand the stress of firing its principal weapon and to protect it from incoming fire. This factor, alongside the use of an atomantic shield array, makes Sanitars notoriously durable. Such is their resilience that Sanitars are beyond the ability of most small arms, no matter how advanced, to harm. It is known that this particular class of heavy siege automata is still utilized by the mysterious Legio Cybernetica in the late 41st millennia. The Sanitar Calyx. A variant of the Sanitar class siege automata. Rumours persist that this extraordinarily powerful variant of the Thanatar was the work of the combined efforts of the Solex Myrmidon and the Omega Shiva Covenant of the Ordo Reductor, alongside unknown representatives of the Legio Cybernetica. The Sanitar Calyx combines the deadly tech arcana of all three of these secretive factions into a single devastating weapons platform geared towards the vanguard of siege assault warfare, able to both sunder the strongest fortifications in moments and conduct targeted strikes to neutralize defensive batteries or turret emplacements with the lethal fire of its Solex heavy las cannon. These rare siege automata were held as sacred by the Tagmata of the Ordo Reductor covenants, which fielded them, as well as signs of particular prestige within the cult Mechanicus, and were seldom committed to battle without support escorts of lesser battle automata and guardian automata in the field to protect them in their perilous duties. Sanitar Sinis. Unlike the lauded Sanitar Calyx, this variant of the potent Sanitar class siege automata, known as the Sinus, was met from its creation by the Magos of Esteban III with ill fortune and acrimony. An unashamed attempt by the Mechanicum faction on Esteban to increase their power within the order of the machine god's domains. The Sinus was intended to replicate the Sanitar siege automata on a wider scale. By doing so, the Magos of Esteban perhaps hoped to further usurp the sometimes troublesome forward world of Riser's importance in the eyes of the Fabricator General. Without Riser's mastery of Plasma Arcana, however, the Sinus proved an unstable and often self-destructive design, despite its obvious battlefield power. Its machine spirits were equally believed to be erratic and malevolent by those adepts whose task it was to tend them. Regardless, the Fabricator General approved its design over the strong objections of Riser, worsening the feud which had broken out between Riser and Esteban III, although the production of the class was far less successful than hoped. Accusations of sabotage and malefica by Esteban on the covert agents of Riser were commonplace before the outbreak of the Horus heresy, and when Esteban declared for the traitors and Riser the loyalists, bitter blood could at last be settled with iron and fire. Other classes. The Legio Cybernetica also operated many other classes of battle automata, including the Lambda Zeta 01 combat class robot, the Delta Omega 03 combat class robot, and the Rho Tau 17 surveillance class robot. Legio Cybernetica War Gear. Cybernetica Cortex. This is a truly arcane device and a wonder of the Mechanicum's arts, comprising the reasoning control center and animating machine spirit of a battle automata, comprising a synthetic brain of sorts. It consists of an armored casing containing a complex bioplastic mass, which extrudes nerve-like grey tendrils into the body of the robotic frame into which it is housed, invigorating it with strange, false life. Far beyond a simple cogitator in capacity, it is neither truly alive nor sapient, like the dread and inhuman Silica Animus, feared of old. Instead, it is akin to a primal web of bellicose instinct, guided not by self-awareness and reason, but by a programmed framework of encoded behavior, comprising simple exacting instructions and commands. The result is a superior, self-guided weapon, a machine predator that will actively and instinctively pursue its foes as well as act with a degree of tactical sense and self-preservation beyond anything a combat servitor is capable of, but without the dangers of revolt and the development of blasphemous machine intelligence. Also the Legio Cybernetica claim. Cortex Controller. This control and signaling device uses datagen to command battle automata fitted with Cybernetica Cortex systems, allowing the wielder to witness the battlefield through the automata's own senses, as well as monitor their status and exact precise control over their actions. Only the most highly experienced and specifically augmented adepts of the Mechanicum and the Forge Lords of the Legionis Astartes can hope to fathom the use of these fractious devices and successfully interpret the storm of data streaming from their unliving minions. Reactor Blast. Most battle automata are powered by compact reactor cores which pulse like living hearts within them, pumping electrically charged vitae fluid from their cortex around their frames and affording them the ability to self-repair and react more in the manner of living creatures than inert machines. Should these reactors be breached at last, they can detonate, consuming the battle automata's remains in a fiery explosion. Atomantic Shielding. Certain battle automata designs feature particularly powerful atomantic reactor cores designed to energize defense field generators built into the battle automata's exterior armor plating, as well as power its combat systems. Mechanicum Protectiva. This term covers a variety of energy fields and defensive shield projectors devised by the Magos of the Mechanicum to protect themselves both on the battlefield and from assassination by their rivals. For this reason, the frequency and modulation of each device is a closely guarded secret. Enhanced Targeting Array. Certain battle automata are fitted with additional slaved cogitators and sub-incunabalo machine spirits, artificial intelligence subroutines, devoted to relentlessly tracking and targeting of any and all potential threats in range. Battle Automata Power Blades. Fitted to the primary weapon limbs of some battle automata, these saber-like bladed power weapons use molecular disruptor fields supercharged with power from the battle automata's core. They are a close combat weapon. Infravisor. This simple visor allows its users to access a wide range of the electromagnetic spectrum. So equipped, they can see better in low-light conditions than a normal human could see in optimal daylight. Lightning Gun. This aptly named weapon takes the form of a baroquely designed carbine, either connected to a micro-reactor or, in the case of an auto-reductor Thalax, their firer's own cybernetic power core. It fires an ionizing lasbeam, down which a powerful base discharge of electromagnetic forces is unleashed, and is equally effective at slaughtering the living and overloading machine targets alike. Shock Charges. Used to augment the combat power of Legio Cybernetica battle automata, these devices amplify the forces of the automata's blows with powerful electrostatic discharges, which detonate like thunderclaps when striking their target. Maxim Bolter. A relatively compact, short-chambered rotary bolter, these weapons are capable of a much higher rate of fire than a standard bolter, but their weight and recoil mean that they may only be used by heavily augmented users, such as Carcinos servitors and the myrmidons of the cult Mechanicum. Mauler Pattern Bolt Cannon. A field support weapon found within the Mechanicum Scitari Tech Guard formations, mounted on certain battle automata. These baroque and bulky automatic cannons differ from the most common heavy bolter only in caliber, with the Mauler using substantially larger and denser shells, with a proportionately larger and stronger gun frame needed to handle the firing stresses involved. These powerful weapons secrets are jealously guarded by the Mechanicum. Photon Thruster Weapons. The arcane secrets of these deadly but unstable beam weapons are jealously guarded by the Adeptus who hold them, even from their own brotherhoods within the Mechanicum, leading some to believe the technology is Xenos in origin. When fired, they unleash howling, needle-thin beams of utter blackness, able to pierce the densest matter, slashing and slicing armored men and machinery apart like razors, leaving pulsing waves of darkness in their wake. The exotic power sources of these unearthly weapons are extremely unstable, and catastrophic failure can lead its firer to being consumed by raging black flames until only dust remains. Paragon of Metal. While each battle automata of the Legio Cybernetica is itself a creation of a near-lost age of human power, its form and function is a miracle of technological artifice and the production of arcane secrets without number. There remains among them war machines with powers and capabilities far beyond their peers. Whether somehow blessed by the Omnissiah's hand, the production of a single Magos' unmatched genius, or the darker influence of the Forbidden, a paragon of metal is a near unstoppable engine of war, albeit a machine perhaps not to be trusted, even by its masters. Abeyant. Considered in part as a symbol of status as well as a functional tool by many high-ranking magi of the Mechanicum. An abeyant is a name given to a general class of hovering conveyances into which the rider's augmetics and life support systems are directly connected through bionic linkage, so that the machine vehicle becomes an extension of their own body. Many of the higher-ranking domini of the Legio Cybernetica, or the Ordo Reductor, prefer to take to the battlefield mounted on specifically outfitted abeyants, often taking the form of either stylized throne or enclosed scarab-like framework. Their principal advantages are that their mag-suppressor fields allow the most war-torn battlefield to be traversed with ease, and their armored life support chassis greatly improves their user's survivability. Cybersurgy. The Magi of the Legio Cybernetica are privy to many ancient secrets from the dark age of technology, a time when the unliving phalanxes of mankind's creations shattered forgotten alien empires to carve humanity's first empire from the stars. Although much of this lore has been lost or become expressly forbidden, such fragments of knowledge allow the Magi to fashion and maintain a small but powerful cadre of battle automata for the Imperium. Such is the nature of the dark arcana of the Cybersurgy, however, that it is not without its risks, as what is awakened may slip the leash of its master's control, with disastrous consequences. Components. A robot, like an Astartes dreadnought, is the production of the synthesis of multiple advanced technologies required to construct its armored shell, artificial muscle and nerve bundles, power plant, weapons control systems, equipment interfaces, and central neural cortex. The forges of the Adeptus Mechanicus turn out many robots of the age-old designs stored within the core memory of their logic stacks. For example, both the Castellan and Crusader pattern robots are known to have fought on the sides of both loyalists and traitors during the Horus Heresy. The designs have remained virtually unchanged since that time, with perhaps only minor cosmetic differences and variations. The compatibility of the near-identical components shared with the Dreadnought simplifies many supply and repair problems on the battlefield. It is not unknown for Legio Cybernetica cohorts to have been cannibalized out of existence to provide spare parts for Dreadnoughts. In return, Legio Tech Adepts have not been averse to dismantling Dreadnoughts, sometimes killing its occupant in the process when making battlefield repairs. As might be imagined, such actions are not well regarded by any Space Marine chapter, which should catch a Legio Tech Adept actually killing a Dreadnought battle brother to save his or her mechanical pets. Cortex and Programming. Constructed from artificially engineered neuroproteins and enzymes, the cortex is the artificial brain of a robot. Imprinted with simple maintenance, task and movement algorithms, the cortex serves as a rudimentary mind, enabling the robot to obey simple instructions from its assigned tech adept when away from the battlefield. These firmware routines are often patterned after those which exist in the organic neural cortexes of simple living creatures. It is known that a robot commonly develops a canine-like devotion to its technician master. Before deploying a robot into battle, the firmware routines are overlaid and replaced with so-called Wetware. This is the robot's combat software, which defines the commands of its handler. For example, Wetware contains a set of algorithms that tell a robot where it is to deploy on the battlefield, or when to fire its weapons, or detonate its self-destruct charges. Whatever the given situation, a robot always follows its pre-prepared programming, even when such orders will not produce the correct outcome for a given situation. Where a human can easily adapt to unexpected developments, a robot does not possess the mental adaptability required to successfully navigate the demands of a rapidly changing battlefield. Like any other weapon system, a robot without its cortex is as useless as a bolter without its space marine. Without an operational cortex, the robot is merely a heap of junk so it can only take whatever punishment is meted out to it. But with a fully programmed Cortex, a robot can prove itself the equal of many other opponents on the battlefield. Slave and Master Systems. In some situations, robots do not need a Cortex to be fully operational, as they also possess the ability to act as the slave of a master robot, receiving orders by wireless radio communication from the master robot. The master is fitted with a Cortex and Wetware program, which in turn relays algorithmic instructions to the slave robots fitted with standard Vox communicators. Each of these slave robots follows the instruction of the master's program in turn, but the master robot must remain in close proximity to its slaves, for if it were to move beyond the effective range of its Vox transmitter, the other robots would simply freeze in place, lacking the necessary instructions to carry out any operations. Should 6 or more of its communicator signals be jammed, a slave robot cannot perform any actions, and will freeze in place until further instructions are received. If the master robot's program or Cortex are damaged, all of its slave robots are affected equally. Communicator damage to a slave robot means that it can no longer receive or transmit data, grinding it to an immediate halt or so. Any damage to a master robot's communicator brings all its slave robots to a halt. Any other damage to the master robot's other systems has no effects on its slaves. Any number of slave robots can be controlled by a single master robot, although the usual ratio is 1 master to 3 slaves. When a larger ratio is used, damage to a master robot's program can halt too many slave robots in a single stroke. End quote. Now I recall using some of these wondrous monsters in my earliest days of playing this great game of Warhammer 40k. Of course, my favourite was the Colossus, for obvious reasons. Thumpy melty. Who could argue? But alas, I find I have not got them any more. A crying shame. With the release of more plastic figures for the Horus Heresy, I am deeply hoping that these wonderful models, their derivatives and their supporting personnel will soon be purchasable through Games Workshop themselves. Because I honestly don't care how pretty a model is, if it's at that cost and with the Forge World materials that have to be manipulated and altered due to being fine cast. Then I don't want them. But I do want a Legio Cybernetica on my shelves. So here's crossing our fingers that the Horus Heresy line will explode into plastic and onto the shelves of our local Warhammer outlet in the very near future. Great Omnissiah, let it be so. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. You know the rest. And no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.